In Palworld, there are plenty of great pals that are all useful in their own ways. However, when starting a brand new world, having good pals working at your base early on will greatly help your progression throughout the game. So after hours of looking through every single pal in the game, I've come up with 10 pals to make your base as efficient as possible during the early stages of your playthrough. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Speakerhead, and today I wanted to give you my top 10 picks for the best early game base pals. But before we get into this list, I just wanted to give a friendly reminder that if you enjoy any of the music you hear during this video or just want to support the channel in general, it's all part of my DMCA free music label, Speakerhead Studios. All the music on this label is completely DMCA free, so go ahead and use it for any of your content creating needs. We currently have over 60 songs available on multiple platforms, so if you want to check those out, all the links will be in the description below. But with that out of the way, let's get back to the video. So before I actually start talking about my top 10 picks, I wanted to start off by mentioning that even though all these pals are efficient in their own fields of work, technically any pal can be extremely efficient if you know how to upgrade them properly. That's why at the end of this list I'll also be explaining how to triple the work efficiency of any pal. Now the very last thing I want to talk about before getting into this list is that I want to explain what I determined to be an early game pal. To keep this as sweet and simple as possible, the only criteria I had while making this list is that a pal must be found somewhere close to the default starting area, and also any pal on the list must be able to be found in the wild under level 20. But with those criteria out of the way, let's finally get into the list. So starting with our first pal on the list, and that's going to be Dynawesome. Now for each of these pals on this list, I wanted to find pals that were at least a level 2 in one base skill. However, with Dynawesome, just like many other pals on this list, they're a level 2 in both lumbering and gathering. And while there are other early game pals that are just as efficient in either of these skills, it's much better to have a single pal that can do multiple things early on while you don't have many slots available at your base. Now moving on to the next pal, I have Arsox. So Arsox is easily the best kindling pal you can get early in the game, plus he is able to do lumbering as well, which is nice. But with how low of a level you can find them at, they're definitely a useful early game pal to have working at your base. So on to my third pick, I chose Azarobe. Now for this pal, I do consider it to be a bit of a loophole in this list. So while you can only find the normal Azarobe on one of the Sanctuary Islands at higher levels than 20, however you are able to catch the boss version of this pal, which can be found at level 17. But with the level 3 in watering, this actually makes this pal one of the best watering pals in the game. In fact, the only watering pal that I know beats it is going to be Yormantide. So to say Azarobe is the best early game watering pal is honestly an understatement, which is why it made the list. Talking about my fourth pick now, I have Digtoise up next. Just like Azarobe, Digtoise has a level 3 in mining, which easily puts him at the top of his field compared to any other pal you'd find at under level 20. And also, just like my previous pick, Digtoise easily made the list for that reason. Now onto my number 5 pick, I chose Vanwyrm. So Vanwyrm is going to be the go-to transporting pal for any early game base setup with having a level 3 in that skill. Along with its transporting abilities, Vanwyrm has a level 1 in kindling, which is pretty useful as well. With that combination of base skills, that secured Vanwyrm's place on my list. Moving on to number 6, I went with Univolt. Now to be completely honest, most players won't really need an electric pal at their base until mid to late game once electricity is required for certain machines. That being said, if I were to suggest an early game electric pal, I would suggest Univolt. He has a level 2 in electricity and he also has a level 1 in lumbering, so he could be used at your base until you actually do need electricity. But like I mentioned before, you don't really need an electric pal super early on in the game, but I did want to mention it to you all as an option for those who might be interested. Now moving on to the next pal on my list, I have Tombat. So Tombat is actually a surprisingly good pal to have in the early parts of the game. This pal has a level 2 in gathering, mining, and transporting, which is wild considering that you can find him right away in the default spawning area at night. But because you're able to find this guy so early on and his skills are so great, that's why I had to put him on this list. Talking about my 8th pick, I chose Penking. Penking is another one of those loophole pals because he's technically only found on the Sanctuary Island, but you are able to find the boss version of him at level 15. Plus, if you have a lot of money saved up, Penking is a pretty common pal to be found at the black market tier. But talking about Penking's base stats, they're a level 2 in mining, transporting, handiwork, cooling, and watering, which makes him a solid worker in many fields. And because he's such a great well-rounded pal for early game use, I had to add him to the list. Now for my 9th pick, I went with Bristla. I chose Bristla due to her having a level 2 in medicine production. However, they're also a level 1 in planting, gathering, transporting, and handiwork, which is super helpful. While medicine production isn't a base skill you'll be needing a pal for too often, it's nice to have an efficient pal that can do that task if needed, which is why they made the list. Now before we move on to the last pal on this list, according to my YouTube analytics, 99% of people who watch my content are not subscribed, which I wish I was making up. So if you enjoy the content and want to see more of it, make sure to like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. Now moving on to our final pal on the list, and I chose Robin Quill. During my playthroughs of Palworld, I completely overlooked this pal, however in reality they're actually a pretty solid pal for early game use. Robin Quill is a level 2 in gathering, transporting, and handiwork, along with being a level 1 in lumbering, planting, and medicine production. With a total of 6 different base skills this pal can do, he is easily one of the most versatile pals you could have at your base. But because this pal is so useful to so many base skills, I had to add him to this list. And with that, those are my top 10 picks for the best early game base pals. With the pals I chose, if you were to have one of each pal at your base, you would have at least one level 2 worker in every base skill. However, as I mentioned earlier in the video, any pal has the potential of being a great worker as long as you know how to upgrade them. So now it's time for me to show you how to do that. Now, in order to get the max work speed for any pal, the first thing you need to do is breed your pals that have the best passive skills to boost work speed. The best combination I could find was going to be Artisan, Work Slave, Serious, and Lucky. With this combination of passive skills, this will give your pal an extra 115% boost in work speed. That being said, with Lucky being a hard passive skill to get due to needing to find a lucky pal with the skill in the first place, the next best skill you could go with would be Conceited, which gives a 10% work speed boost compared to Lucky's 15% work speed boost. But after you get your pal with the perfect passive skills, the next step is to upgrade your pal in the Condenser. So many players know that upgrading a pal in the Condenser upgrades the pal's special ability along with their general stats. However, I don't think as many players know that once a pal is upgraded to max in the Condenser, that pal will gain an extra level in every base skill that it has. Now to upgrade a pal to max level in the Condenser, it takes 117 pals to do this. That being said, the reason why this is step 2 is because it most likely took you quite a few attempts to get the perfect pal with the passive traits you wanted. So assuming you didn't butcher all your failed pal attempts, you should have enough pals saved to condense your pal to max level. Now once you're all done finished condensing, the next thing you want to do is upgrade your pal's work speed in the Statue of Power. By using 10 small pal souls, 6 medium pal souls, and 6 large pal souls in the Statue of Power, your pal will gain an additional 30% boost in work speed. Now for the next step, you want to build all of these structures somewhere on your base. All of these structures give work speed boosts based on which structures are built at your base. For example, if you wanted to upgrade a pal's watering speed, then you'd want to build a fountain. But having all these structures built at your base will drastically improve the work speed of all your pals. Now moving on to the final step in upgrading your pals, and that's by giving them food that will increase their work speed. For this, I'd recommend going with either salads or Mazzarina hamburgers. While hamburgers do give a greater work speed boost to your pals, salads are much easier to produce, so it's really up to the player on which they prefer to use. But assuming you went with the best upgrade options I previously mentioned, your pal should have an extra 195% work speed boost. Now to show off the results, I set up a little experiment at one of my bases to show you the difference that all these upgrades make. Now for this experiment, I chose to use Wumpos, and the reason why I chose them is because they have a level 2 in cooling, which would be similar level base skill to the pals that I mentioned earlier. Plus I already used Wumpos at my bases, plus I had a Wumpo with Lucky, so I decided to use him. But without further ado, let's get into the experiment. Alrighty, so here we have our 2 Wumpo that we're going to be using to show off the difference between just regular work speed and the upgraded work speed we talked about. So over to our right, we have Steve, which is just our regular Wumpo at 70 work speed. And then over to the left, we have Super Steve, which is our upgraded Wumpo. So the plan is I'm just going to have these guys crush down 2,000 Palladium fragments in the crushers that I have in front of me, and we're just going to show off the difference in the work speed. And since I can't start them at the exact same time, I'm even going to give regular Steve an advantage and start his first. But without further ado, let's actually see the difference in work speed between these two. Alrighty, so it's been a couple minutes now, and as you can see, Super Steve is just absolutely killing it compared to just regular Steve. And this is what I was getting at when I was saying the most important part was all of the active skills and buffs you gave to your pal, because as you can see, it's a massive difference in their work skills. But with this little experiment out of the way, let's get back to the other me. Now, if that experiment doesn't prove my point about upgrades, I don't know what will. But as you can see, it doesn't matter what level a pal is in any skill, because you just need to know how to properly upgrade them. With that being said, if you combine these upgrades with the pals I previously mentioned, this will easily give you the most efficient early base game setup. And with that, that's going to be my video on the best early game base pals. Let me know in the comments below if you found this video helpful, if there's anything I might have missed. Also, once again, if you enjoyed the music in this video or just want to support the channel in general, it's all part of my royalty-free music label, Speakerhead Studios. All the links will be in the description below. But that's all I have to say, so I appreciate you checking out this video, and I'll catch all y'all in the next one. Take it easy, everybody.